Well, welcome everybody to our November Forgotten Grapes Wine Club virtual tasting. We are so excited to have Tyler Eck, the owner and winemaker, co-owner and winemaker, I should say, of Dunites Wine Company with us tonight. Thank you for those of you who are joining us. I know it's a little odd for us to have this much of a delay between the deliveries and the virtual tasting, but Tyler had some important business to take care of on the East Coast. You can make great wine, but you've also got to sell great wine as well. So we're glad that you joined us. And for those of you joining us on the replay, we are excited to have you joining us whenever you are joining us as well. As always, we have everybody muted. So if you've got any questions, comments, things you're pairing with your wines tonight for Tyler, throw those into the chat. Allison and I will be monitoring that. We will ask Tyler the questions as they pop up or mention the comments, whatever it is. If we've got a little bit of time at the end, we will be throwing it open and letting you talk to Tyler and ask him any questions you've got as well. But to begin, we always start with our very important question, which is Tyler, what is the most important, or what is the most memorable bottle of wine that you've ever opened?
That's such a good question, too. Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you all. Thanks for spending a little bit of time with us tonight and opening up 4 bottles of wine. It's always a good start to a Thursday evening, so it's nice to see you. The most important bottle of wine,
Or most memorable. It doesn't have to be
most
important.
memorable. Well, I think that it's a wine. It wasn't. It's a simple wine in a lot of ways. It's not an expensive bottle. Um, but it was important in kind of the moment that I had it and kind of how it stuck with me. It was earlier in my wine career. I was working harvest, kind of bouncing between Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere. And at one point, when I was back home in California, in between working harvest, I was working at a wine shop, and I brought a bottle home and shared it with my dad. And it was a Grenache from the Southern Rhone by a producer named Domaine Gramenon. It's a pretty classic Southern Rhone estate that's a little bit out of the convention for the area. They're in a little bit of a different area, slightly cooler climate. Um, Slightly, they've been committed to organics and biodynamics since long decades before it was cool, and their winemaking is very hands-off. And just that bottle of wine that we sat at the countertop, and I don't remember. I think we cooked dinner. I don't remember what we ate, burgers or steaks, or I have no idea.
Perfect.
I don't remember what we did.
Perfect with the Southern Rhone Grenache burgers.
Yeah, I don't remember what we did, but I think this bottle at the time cost, I think, $18. It was not an expensive bottle, and we sat there, and as we were eating our food and cooking, and each glass was so different than the glass before.
Mm.
And it was just kind of blowing us away. We're going, wow, like this wine's so different. We were both kind of tripping out, like talking to each other, like going, this tastes so different from the last sip and that last glass. And by the time that we finished the bottle, the wine was almost, unrecognizable from the first sip that we had had.
Mhm.
And so that's always stuck out for me as something kind of to aspire to, and something that, it is symbolic and a hallmark of wines that are come from an area that are thoughtfully farmed, in a way that kind of is harmonious with nature in some way. And the winemaking aligns with that, where there's not an intrusive fingerprint of the winemaker on that bottle, where the wine is able to evolve over the course of a meal. And that's something that I really want to strive for, where I want people to be able to enjoy a bottle and see its evolution between glasses, between bottles, assuming that they taste it multiple times, between years, because that's what separates wine from other beverages, really. It's an agricultural product. It's changing, and it's never going to be the same. And and that's really cool that sometimes a wine can go through phases that are a little bit different or that challenge us, and then sometimes they're just pure pleasure, and it could still be the same bottle of wine. So that is, I think, the most important bottle of wine I've ever had.
I love it. And it's a great example of the fact that, it doesn't have to be an expensive bottle. It doesn't have to be a rare bottle. It doesn't have to be some exotic grape. Everybody's got their own story, but it's really the context in which you enjoy that bottle and that wine at that moment that can really set the scene for you. I thought that Graminon was something that Nancy Reagan started in the 80s to try to use grammar to keep kids off of drugs, but I guess I was completely wrong about that.
I was
Yeah,
too young to know that kind of joke.
Fair enough. No, but I love that experience. I have had, especially with some Southern Rhone wines, some experiences where I literally have not had a sip of the wine. It was poured into my glass, and I sat there for 40, 45 minutes just inhaling the aromas and swirling it. And like you were saying, where every glass, the flavors were completely different. Same thing with the aromas. It's like every time you swirl it, every couple of minutes, you stick your nose in there and you're picking up something new, something different. And it's always an amazing alchemy of wine and, kind of puts you in your place when you think you know a lot about wine in terms of when you have an experience like that, that just sort of boggles your mind on it. Um,
And remember, you asked him the most memorable wine, not the best wine he's ever had. While the best wine can also not have to be the most expensive wine, the most
right.
memorable is the one that sticks with you.
No, and that's what's always great about asking that question because we've had some people who have thrown out, very rare bottles of Bordeaux or final bottle type of things. And we've had some that have said it was, the like $7.99 bottle that I shared with my dad for the last time or something. I mean, not as maudlin as that, but we've run the gamut, which is fun. So it's always a fun question to ask to get into the mind of the winemaker. Speaking of which, we are going to be starting tonight, by the way, with the Albarino, the Dunites 2024 San Luis Obispo Coast Albarino. We'll be then drinking the Chardonnay, the Pinot Noir, and the Dune Song Rhone blend for those that are playing along at home. But Tyler, you mentioned that you had that bottle kind of early on in your winemaking history and your winemaking journey. What was the start? What was the catalyst to kind of get you into the wine business? What was the bug that bit you?
Well, I went to college at UC Santa Barbara, and during that time, my aunt and uncle had a place in Los Olivos, and I was spending a bunch of time over the hill up in Santa Barbara wine country. And we would go around to tasting rooms during the day. It's kind of in the not so distant history, but back when tastings were free or not expensive, and it was kind of bellied to the bar,
And
and
you got the glass too with you.
you got the glass, and it was definitely a different experience than today. And that was, and there weren't nearly as many wineries either. I mean, I think Los Olivos at that time had less than 10 wineries, tasting rooms inside the town. So yeah, just going up there, drinking wine, visiting wineries. I'd been up in the area around, before plenty of times and had kind of, so I already knew like physically that it was beautiful and that it was something that existed. My parents drank a little bit of wine, but just spending time up there, eating good food, drinking good wine, having good conversations with family and friends. And it was really cool. So when I graduated and was working, I decided that what I was going to do for the rest of my life was probably not what I was working on at that period, and I was
What were
planning to
you
go
working
back.
on at that period?
It was environmental consulting,
Ah,
Okay.
a
but I was
noble
going.
cause doesn't pay that well.
Yeah, well, yeah,
Like wine does?
it's yeah,
Yeah,
no, not
fair.
so much. It was like impact reports and stuff
Oh
like that.
wow. Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah. Um, I was going back to school, and that was the financial crisis as well. So I pivoted, and I was kind of, well, there's all this wine up there, and I have an interest in it. I'm not knowledgeable in it by any sense of the imagination, but I think it's cool. And there's obviously someone who works at these wineries, and that's their job to make wine, and that seems interesting, and like I would be curious for the rest of my life if that was my job. So I looked into it, and I decided to go back to school and study viticulture and enology. And there we go. Now I'm basically unemployable in any other industry.
You have backed yourself into a corner. So
That's right.
where did you go to study viticulture and enology?
Well, I also had an itch to travel.
Mhm.
So I went to New Zealand and studied at Lincoln University. So I basically spent a couple of years in New Zealand. I started working and got in, worked up in Sonoma, worked down in Tasmania, and
Hmm.
then ended up working in France for a couple of years before coming back to Santa Barbara County, which was always the goal.
What would you say are the differences in retrospect between learning to make wine in New Zealand versus learning to make wine here in the United States? Are there differences?
They're fairly similar.
Hmm.
I mean, if in terms of,
I assume
in a
everything over there is
university
metric,
setting.
right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's a U in color, so I had to figure
Flavor.
that one out really quick, because you write about color a lot in winemaking school. Um,
But
but
measurement
no,
wise, we Americans have to learn European ways, so it's probably the same language when it comes to measurements.
yeah, yes, of course. So it was all in metric, which made so much more sense at the time, but now I've probably it's
And the
gone.
wine swirls the
Um,
other direction, right? When it goes the other
Yeah,
way.
yeah. The wine swirls counterclockwise. Um, no, it's similar textbooks essentially. Between Australia, New Zealand, California, even France. There's a lot of similar texts and similar references. There's not a great deal of difference. Like no one in one university knows kind of that the knowledge base is really similar.
Hmm.
You're not learning that big of a difference. Obviously, there's kind of regional, industrial kind of differences and rules that you learn. It took me longer to like learn the rules of what's allowed in California in terms of
Right.
like if you there's all these funny rules in wine about like what percent of the wine has to be from a specific county if you're
Hmm.
labeling it as a county or from a specific appellation or varietals or vineyards. So all of that kind of stuff, which isn't that big of a difference, that doesn't mean a lot to Dunites. We're relatively simple in that regard, but for other, employers that I've worked with, then that really does matter. So there's a lot of regional kind of differences around rules and regulations. That's the biggest difference. Winemaking, the wine chemistry is the same, well, no matter where you are.
Yeah, I guess no matter where you go, if you're teaching physics or mathematics or learning physics or mathematics, it's the same numbers, the same formulas, ultimately, when you get down to it. So you spent a little time in France. Were you down in the Southern Rhone Valley, or where were you making wine in France?
I was in the Northern Rhone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I worked a harvest there, and during that time, they offered to sponsor me for a visa.
Mhm.
So I got a full-time visa, and I had to come back to California to go to the embassy here to to kind of finalize that. And in the time that I was gone, the equivalent of like the cellar master there, it was a small. He was in charge of everything. He worked by himself in the cellar. He tried to catch a barrel because all the barrels are stacked. They're not on
Oh
racks like
no.
here. You're not doing things with the forklift. It's all hand stacking barrels and kind of old school stuff like that. But a barrel was falling and he tried to catch it and he tore out his rotator cuff.
Oh God.
So when I got there, then I think God, you're back. Like Sylvain hurt himself last week, and he's not coming back for a long time. So I went there for this kind of, you know, experience where I was going to be working in the vineyards and in the cellar, and it was I was just so thrilled that they had offered me the ability to stay with them. That was really generous of them. And then all of a sudden, I was thrust into this position where it's like, oh no, like Sylvain's gone, so you're in charge of doing all the work, including like running the bottling line and just kind of managing the cellar. So that was thankfully I had spent whatever 3 or 6 months, I don't remember how, with Sylvain already, and I'd seen him and I'd learned from him, and he was just like the greatest mentor and like the greatest craftsman at how he did everything. So I'd seen how he did this all. Because if I walked into that cellar without that
Yeah,
experience, there's no way. A California kid, I'm used to like forklifting things around, and you go to
right.
France and it's like, nope, there's no forklift. You have to stack the barrels 4 high by hand, and it's
You basically use two by fours and just sort of roll it up on top of a
not
couple
even
of,
that.
geez.
It's like scaffolding that you're lifting the barrels up on stages. It's awesome. And thankfully, I was young enough to have a strong back because I would also not be. It would break me today.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, and any pain you have today is probably because of that.
Yeah, we'll blame France for that.
there you go. How
But
is your French, by the way?
I've
It's
heard
awful.
other winemakers. I've met other winemakers along the way. I'm trying to remember. It was at a Rhone Rangers event. I know there's a producer from, I think they're in Australia or something. They do sparkling wine. It was the same sort of thing. They came in to they had interned for a few months, and suddenly they became the winemaker. The winemaker left, and they were in charge of making sparkling wine with really no knowledge of making sparkling wine, and learned on the ground and made really good sparkling wine. It's like,
It's a very French mentality of like just the apprentice suddenly becomes the master like that.
Oh, I
So
think I think the guy with his name on the bottle was going, "Oh no, this Californian is doing all the work now."
well, at least, I mean, it really is amazing when you think that wine, you really only make wine for 3-4 months of the year, although it is a year-long process because of what you do in the cellar with cleaning and prepping and other things that you do. But it's amazing to think that you can follow someone for 3 or 4 months, and how much information, you take on just by doing the work and following what other people do,
Mhm.
that you learn so
Oh,
much.
totally. Yeah, yeah, and to be clear, I wasn't the winemaker. I wasn't making any of the decisions. I was just the one doing it out there. But that still at that time and that stage was a step up for me.
yeah,
And no, I'm forever thankful for them for letting me do that and having the opportunity to spend time there and do that because you're just exposed to so much and to see everything that's going on and to be exposed to obviously, wines and French culture and French food and everything like that and how wine plays into a lifestyle in a way that I aspire for it to do here is really cool.
absolutely. And before we jump back across the pond and get into how you got back to California and decided to start your own winery, take us through this Albarino. I have to say, Albarino is one of those grapes, and I know we've tasted quite a few here through the Forgotten Grapes Wine Club over the years, but it's amazing, just how steep its rise has been, especially here on the Central Coast. It feels like, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, nobody had any idea what Albarino is. And now it's, arguably probably behind, Chardonnay and Viognier is the third most popular wine grape that you see produced in the Central Coast. At least I know in Paso Robles, it's really taken on a
Yeah.
big role, and I suspect in the SLO Coast, you're seeing more and more of it. Given the concept of Rias Baixas and Galicia and the proximity to the coast and how well the grape does in those cooler maritime climates. So why did you decide to make a white with Albarino? Take us through this particular wine.
Yeah. Uh, for all the reasons you just said, really, I mean, we love the wines that from Albarino in Spain and Portugal. Find that they're just really distinct. They have a lot of personality. They're true like representations of where they're from in the world. And we're blessed by having a lot of Albarino planted here on the San Luis Obispo coast in small quantities, but in a lot of different vineyards.
Mhm.
And that's really, that foundation was laid probably 15, 20 years ago by a consortium of growers that kind of all decided that we have a lot in common with Galicia. You know, we have this maritime climate. Latitudinally, we're much closer there than we are to some of the other northern regions of Spain, or France and Europe.
Yeah.
But we have a much similar climate than this area. So maybe we should plant Albarino, and that's kind of how Albarino's made its way into so many different vineyards around here. I mean, there's more Albarino than most other white grapes. You know, Sauvignon Blanc probably there's more of. Viognier small amounts, but it's yeah. I think that it really does have a true home and a true personality here. And what I love about the wine is that aromatically, it's got all the opulence of California. It's got all the stone fruit and mandarin peel and just slightly floral kind of aromatics that are all very Albarino, but turned up a notch in California with that sunshine. And then the palate is really unexpected in how it's got so much acidity and freshness and energy with a little bit of salinity on the finish.
Mhm.
It's not exactly what you expect when you first smell the wine. It's so rich aromatically that sometimes I feel like even going back to them saying, "Oh, this wine's going to be sweet," and say, "Oh no, it's not. It's racy."
Yeah. No, it's fantastic. And it's interesting. Tell us, where did you find this particular vineyard or vineyards that you're working with on this one? What take us through how you produce this particular wine in 2024? Because I know we talked about this a little before we started the chat, that 24 was such a challenging year here on the Central Coast and in the SLO Coast, particular, lots of crazy heat spikes, even on the coast where it's usually fairly temperate, but you were getting probably days of 80, 85, much, much warmer than you'd expect on the Central Coast.
Yeah, I mean, 2024 as a whole, since most of these wines are coming from there, it's a vintage I really like the wines from. We had extremely low yields. So yields were down 40 to 50% for most varieties,
Mhm.
especially Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. So it was a challenging vintage for for that, for that reason. Um, and then as we started getting into the harvest, we started having this burst of heat. And heat waves are what scare me during harvest. That's the defining factor. That's what can throw things really sideways for us. So we kept having these bursts of heat, but nothing catastrophic. And those concentrated wines from the low yields with those little bits of heat just led to these wines that are like so exuberant and fresh and vibrant, but then the structure of the palate has lots of freshness and energy to them. So they're not like they're really balanced in that way, in that they're so exuberant but so fresh and energetic at the same time. For this wine, we get the grapes from a vineyard called Mar Farm. It is in the Edna Valley, kind of the heart of the Edna Valley. And it's an organically farmed site. So all of the vineyards that we work with, we try to source organically sourced fruit. And this is an interesting vineyard. We source a lot of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay from there, and then the Albarino is down kind of below the vineyard, almost like in this little creek bed that can
Um,
get a little wet during wet winters,
yeah, and I
a
imagine
little wet and
super,
soggy.
super cool and possibly frost potential if it gets too cold down there.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. So we have this. It's right on this bank of this kind of creek, and it's fun. I mean, we've at this point we've worked with Albarino from three different vineyards on the San Luis Obispo coast, and they all have their own personalities, but I love them all equally. I mean, it's such a fun variety.
Nice. So what drew you to Albarino? Because I mean, with your background in winemaking in New Zealand and France, I'm not hearing Spain in there. So was it just, there were opportunities to get some Albarino and you thought, let's do it? Or was this, something that you were always looking to kind of bring into your portfolio?
Well, it was kind of because we made Chardonnay. So we work with five different varieties. On the whites, we work with Chardonnay and Albarino, and on the reds, Pinot Noir, Syrah, and Grenache. So we're tasting all five varieties that we work with today. Um, and Albarino having that little bit of a foothold in the San Luis Obispo coast, it just made sense. It was like, well, we need a white. We need to make another white, or we wanted to make another white. We don't need to do anything, I guess. But it was just like, well, what do we want to do? We're kind of Rhone producers. We focus, and especially when we started, it was Syrah and Grenache. Um, so yeah, so we can do Viognier or Marsanne or Roussanne, but then I I've made a lot. Those are the varieties that I worked with in France that made a lot of sense, but it's not necessarily the varieties that I like to drink. We
Yeah.
don't drink those wines ever. Um, Whereas we do drink
They're,
Albarino and it's
they're forbidden in
around.
your household.
They're not
Marsanne,
forbidden. Nothing's forbidden
Marsanne,
except
no.
no. Nothing's forbidden. We're open. But it just existed. It was like, well, cool. Like, let's get Albarino. Like, let's go find some Albarino to work with, and just it's a fun variety. I think, and like you said earlier, I agree with that it's popular and it's rising in popularity, which is a positive trend in the wine world these days. And
Absolutely.
it's one of those whites that it really is. It's not challenging. Viognier was supposed to be the next hot thing 15 to 20 years ago, and it never happened. And there's probably a few reasons why, but the fans of Viognier always like to say it's because it's too difficult to say. People are intimidated to say Viognier at a restaurant. It's too French sounding. And that might be true, or at least partially true. I don't know. There's other great wines that are really difficult to pronounce. So Albarino, it's such a fun word to say. I don't think it's like challenging to say it, and so I think that's not the reason why it's popular. It's popular because it's a delicious variety and it makes delicious wines that are pretty and kind of strike the right balance between Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay and having, aromatics and richness and it's really cool. But it definitely doesn't hurt that it's not like a challenging word to say in some kind of
It's
different
that no,
language.
that's a great point. I've heard plenty of people butcher Viognier in myriad ways, but I've never heard anybody say Albarino incorrectly. So it's a strong point.
I think that's a very simplistic excuse as to why Viognier never took off. I'm gonna guess it's a little bit more because of not everyone makes it well like people used to
Well,
not make Chardonnay so well.
it's a very difficult grape to grow and to produce. I mean, it's you have to get it right in the sweet spot, or like you were saying, it's going to be too flabby if you let it hang and you lose your acidity, or you lose the aromatics if you pick it too early. So
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an easy scapegoat. It's an easy
exactly.
scapegoat, but Viognier and the Rhone whites famously do not have a lot of natural acidity,
Yeah.
whereas Albarino does, and I think that's something that's really vital to our wines. It's something that we want. We want wines that I don't mind if a wine is exuberant and aromatic as long as the palate has acidity and there's balance to that kind of opulence on the nose. And sometimes Viognier lacks that. Albarino is, and in a funny way, it was kind of a mindset going in and choosing that variety. It's like it's a better version of Viognier.
It's true, and more prevalent and probably cheaper to buy in some places. So
Yeah.
But it's it is Viognier is, I mean, sorry, Alberta. Viognier on the brain now. Albarino is one of those grapes that it can please so many palates because it's got the acidity to please the Sauvignon Blanc drinkers. It's got a little more texture to please the Chardonnay drinkers. It's neither of those, but it's got that fresh brightness, but it's also just not it's not all acid and it's not all brightness, even though that's a big part of it. It's also textured and
yeah, and there
without
are
being
some
weighty.
yeah, and there are some things that the winemaker can do to, balance out, give it a bit more of a mouthfeel, a richness to it. And it does seem to be a white that, despite that high acidity, it has some ageability. Not a tremendous amount, certainly not as much as a Chardonnay. But, I think it's one of those that you can put a little bit of oak on, or even I've seen some acacia recently. People doing acacia barrels or acacia headed barrels with their Albarino to add some depth and character and some ageability to it.
Tyler, for this Albarino, how much do you think it's minerality coming near the coast, low inputs based on your winemaking, or the vintage?
Oh, I think it's the coast. I think that that saltiness that I kind of see in this wine, it's common across all of the wines that I think we'll taste. It's kind of across vineyards, across varietals. It's kind of a hallmark of the San Luis Obispo coast to me. But then for this wine, we do also make this wine slightly different than I think your standard industrial Albarino is made. So we are barrel fermenting this wine in large format oak barrels in 500 liters, so about twice the size of a normal barrel. Um, and treating the wine with a bit more seriousness, because at the same time, all the reasons that we're talking about, what we love about Albarino, it's also a little bit of a victim of the same success that Sancerre and Chablis have, where they've become, ubiquitous in household names, but then there's always people cashing in and trying to industrialize the process and turn the wines around really quickly with stainless steel fermentation and no aging on lees and really churning it out. And and no shame, I'm not, but that's just not the style of wine that we make. We make wines that we want to try to make as complex as possible. Going back to that first bottle, it's that unexpectedness that really excites us about wines. So yeah, so we do allow, barrel fermentation in neutral oak, and then we allow the wines to go through malolactic fermentation as well. So it's not the entirely conventional way that Albarino is made, but there it is the way that I think that really small, really high quality minded Albarino producers in Spain and Portugal are producing the wines often.
Hmm.
Interesting. Um,
Is it an easy grape to grow?
No, it's
Okay.
it's interesting. It sets crops. The crop can be uneven, and it ripens a little bit uneven as well. So exposure to the sun really promotes ripeness, and that's where you get all that, aromatics. But then on the same cluster, berries on the other side that aren't exposed to the sun can be green and hard and have all that acidity and kind of green apple flavor. So and that's probably also for our climate here since we are a little bit cooler, but
mhm,
it's definitely a little bit more uneven in terms of how it sets crop for us and then how it ripens.
Hmm.
And it's
interesting.
and it's susceptible to mildew and all the other fun stuff that is part of growing grapes in a foggy, cool climate here.
Yeah, which makes sense why you kind of see it a little more prevalently here over the hill where you've got less fog and a little bit more heat in Paso Robles area. Um, even kind of the more easterly parts of the Edna Valley as well, east and southern, I think, because you've got a little less fog there as well. So we always ask in terms of wine pairings, what food pairings do you like to pair with this particular Albarino? Given its salinity, its bright acidity, fish is kind of an obvious choice. Seafood, it's a great pairing with that. But we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, seafood is great. I mean, it can go well with chicken or a pasta with like a kind of cream sauce or something. But I'm going to go with some baked or barbecued oysters.
Ooh,
So go down
nice.
and pick up some oysters. I like to put a little G on it,
Mhm. Ooh,
and then with some kind of meat, prosciutto or a salami or something, kind of chop that up, mince that up, and put a little bit of that in there, and put it on the grill or in the oven for not long, 3 to 5 minutes.
yeah.
And it's salty and it's kind of savory and yeah, that is delicious.
Just a simple, easy Tuesday night snack,
Yeah, I mean the hard part's
barbecued
shucking oysters, but
barbecued oyster with
cooking it's easy.
with clarified butter and prosciutto. Absolutely. Just everybody's
Yeah.
got those ingredients in their kitchen.
Well, I mean, you might need to run by the store, but it's three
That's true.
ingredients.
That's true. Susanna, yes, I think paella would go fabulously with this as well. Even if you go with the more traditional paella, because it's got kind of those white meat flavors to it. But yeah, if you've got your mussels, your clams, your chicken, your chorizo, I think it can kind of pair really, really nicely with all of these. Beautiful. All right, let's move on. We're going to move on to the 2023 Oliver's Chardonnay. And this is the point in the story where you've done your time as the, interim cellar master in
Well,
France.
that's a bold call. Well, the name wasn't there. It was still
Well,
salon.
I'm just thinking of like the way the current government operates so that they don't have to, go through congressional hearings. Everybody's an interim this, interim that, so they can just have the position without it. So
Sure.
you're basically the position was thrust upon you, let's put it that way. Um, and at what point do you, escape back to the United States and say, hey, what I really want to do is start my own wine brand?
Well, when it came time to renew the visa, um, I basically had the opportunity to either sign up to stay in France for another year or to come back home. And um, at that time, I felt like I wasn't gonna, in terms of kind of moving up or progressing for a career and trying to work up my way up in the wine industry, I
Mhm.
wasn't going to necessarily improve myself from higher ability by spending
Right.
another year in France. But at the same time, I was going to have that extra year of, being surrounded by all these great wineries and being able to visit wines and learning in this kind of other way of visiting places, tasting, meeting people that we just don't have that. I mean, it's just different than going up to Sonoma and chatting to someone here to be there.
Yeah, that's a
So,
good question actually, because so much of French winemaking, especially in the Rhone Valley, is these small, little family-run operations that I suspect you could, if you, it's exciting to get hired by them. You're going to be very hands-on, making the wine, being active, but you're kind of in a bubble, I imagine. And while you can get out to some of the other wineries, they're all kind of small and I don't know. How do they feel about, stealing away an employee of, I imagine there's kind of some unwritten rules about not being able to transfer as easily as you can here in the United States, where we're a, predominantly cutthroat capitalist society.
yeah, that wasn't even really the question. I mean, they were sponsoring me for my visa, so I
Sure.
wasn't I wasn't trying to go out and find another job, but just the ability to go up to Beaujolais or Burgundy or the Savoie or Piedmont or the Southern Rhone,
Right.
all of these regions are within 2 to 4 hours away.
An easy TGV ride.
An easy TGV or yeah, is pile up, share the gas and the tolls with some friends
Yeah,
and
that's
go and
true.
spend a couple of days visiting other wineries in another region um and just kick rocks and chat to winemakers and visit and see what's going on. So that was kind of that was the what I was weighing. It was, well, I could stay here and I can keep learning in this way that just through the sheer exposure and the ability to go and drive a few hours away to visit some great domain in
Mhm.
any of these places, or I can go home and try to start actually getting a real job. So I chose to do that. And I came back to Santa Barbara County, and got a job and had the goal of start making cool climate Syrah. So yeah, I came home and within a short period, within 6 months, I had met Rachel, who is my wife. So Rachel and I met. Rachel was working for another winery at the time in San Luis Obispo and had finished school at Cal Poly studying viticulture and enology. And so we were just hanging, starting to get to know each other and wanted to make wine. And that's kind of how we found this idea to start making Dunites and to start having a project to work on together. And here we are, 11 years later, making wine together and married with a child. I know Rachel wanted to be here as well, but one of us had to do bath and bedtime tonight.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I know. So I don't know how I
How old's your baby?
3.5.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So
Yeah,
bath
so
and bedtime is vital.
yeah, and it's not easy. So I don't know how I got the long straw to drink wine and just like talk.
I like that you
But
said that's the long straw, not the short straw.
um, but yeah, so that was the impetus. I, at least for myself, always wanted to have a brand, and or maybe not a brand, but I always wanted to make wine. Going back to that first bottle, that important bottle that I had with my dad, which predated all of this. It was something that wasn't really found in the wineries that we were working for. And we knew that the vineyards in the San Luis Obispo coast were important and vital. So at the time, we were both, soon after, when I met Rachel, she was working in San Luis, and she soon moved to Santa Barbara County, where I was working as well. And I was seeing these vineyards up in the San Luis Obispo coast area. And at the time, it was San Luis Obispo County before there was an AVA.
Right.
And I knew that those vineyards were incredible. They were amazingly situated, super close to the ocean, really interesting soils, but I didn't know the names of them. I didn't know who was making wines from them. I sure as heck hadn't tasted any of the wines from there. And the only thing that I knew is that if that vineyard was in Santa Rita Hills, it would have been a household name for Santa Rita Hills fans.
Yeah.
But because it was across the,
$7,500 a ton.
yeah, you know,
Right.
but since it was across the county line, it was being it was being blended away essentially for the
Mhm.
most part. And so we settled on this area, and still today, this is where we're at, and we're absolutely in love with the vineyards here and the climate, and we just think it's so unique. And the more that I think about like this area that we're in, the more and more kind of convinced I become that this is a really unique area, and that the site and the expression of our marine climate has a true expression in the wines.
So
Yeah.
you
Go ahead, Allison.
still have a day job in Santa Barbara County?
No, in San Luis Obispo, in the San Luis Obispo coast. We are full SLO Coast now.
Oh, so you're no longer commuting.
No.
Nice. And Dunites is your full-time job, or are you working for somebody else at this point?
No, so I work for essentially what is a custom crush.
Mhm.
Um, and it's a new project, but it's in Edna Valley, and we're soon going to be opening up a tasting room, which is going to have 4 brands in it,
Mm.
including Dunites. And it's there's going to be an amazing restaurant. The chef that is signed on to join is incredible. He's from LA. He's got a couple restaurants down there. One's got a Michelin star, and Yeah, the new owners are just putting a ton of energy and amazing kind of foresight and ideas into this property that's going to be really, really like game changing for the Edna Valley.
Very cool. And
Where is it going
I,
to be in
I,
the Edna
I
Valley?
think I think I know if I can it because you sent me the address where I was supposed to pick up the wine initially,
Yes.
and it's the old Edna Valley Vintners space. So right there on Biddle Road. If you've seen the movie Sideways and you know the scene where Miles picks up the spit bucket and chugs it, that is in that Edna Valley Vintners tasting room.
No,
So.
he was at
That was at Fess Parker.
Oh, was that at Fess Parker? I always thought it was at
which,
Valley Vineyards.
which, funny enough,
That
is where Tyler used to work.
Ah,
that was
funny.
my yeah. So I worked at Fess Parker, and I was unfortunate enough to see someone come in and reenact that scene.
Oh,
Yeah.
intentionally?
Oh yeah.
Oh, well, okay. Well, intentionally is better than not intentionally if
Oh
they.
no, he came in alone. He knew exactly what he was doing. He came in
Mm,
alone,
Came in alone. He wasn't even
a
like on
bit
a
turned,
dare. Oh,
and he recited the scene and poured the dump bucket on his head and walked out. And
performance art, my friend, just
but
gotta.
at least, I
I
mean, if
think it's a
you're going
midlife
to do it, you've got to
crisis.
have a witness that's like a friend, not, you know.
Well, he's not. He wasn't Gen Z. Like it's not on social
It's
media.
he's
He
an
just did
Xer.
it
He's one
because
of us. Yeah.
I don't know. I have
Oh,
no idea why he
But
did it.
you know what? At least he didn't drink it.
that's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
Anyway,
so
so
exciting project. Yeah.
but
Defense,
yes,
in
you are
defense,
correct.
at a tasting room, in a tasting room, the majority of consumers do not spit, they just dump. So you're probably a lot safer than doing that at a trade tasting where everyone's spitting.
Yeah. Yeah, don't do it, please.
Anyway, that's very exciting. Three other brands, Michelin starred chef moving in there. Very, very cool. I want to circle back though, because you mentioned that um, you kind of got your start with the goal of making cool climate Syrah. Obviously we're not seeing a direct Syrah here, and given the predilection of the slow coast, it's predominantly Chardonnay and Pinot that you're seeing in that area. So, was that kind of the goal transitioned over to these other varietals, or are you still kind of in the back of your mind, or are you still pursuing that cool climate Syrah goal?
No, no. So Syrah and Grenache was the second variety that we worked with, but they're hugely important to our portfolio and I think to the identity of Dunites. It's something that we're really passionate about and we think are really special within our region. But like you said, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay make up 75% of the planted area in San Luis Obispo
Right.
Coast. So, and this is also most of the vineyards that both Rachel and I have worked at, or the wineries that we've worked at, have been making Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. So these are baked into our
Yeah.
DNA as well. So yeah, in the end, I mean, the similarities are very, very clear. And I love Chardonnay. I think that it's the greatest white variety on earth. It's just so versatile, and it can do so much. So it was never a matter of, oh no, we've got to make Chardonnay. It was a matter of, yeah, cool. When do we get to make Chardonnay?
Nice. So take us through the Oliver's Chardonnay. This is the 2023, and we talked a little bit about, you mentioned the heat spikes of 2024, but I know 2023 was the complete opposite. It was such a cool year, especially, into June and July even. Just lots of fog, coolness, even a little bit of rain back then. A lot of people say that 2023 is probably the best, most recent vintage that we've seen for wine in this area in a long time. So take us through that, and then tell us a little bit about Oliver's Vineyard and why you've done a single vineyard Chardonnay from that particular vineyard.
Yeah, we're on a streak of three really great vintages, I think, 23, 24, and 25. And and that's great because we had a challenging 3 year streak before that. 20 and 22 were both really challenging vintages, and 21 was great. So to have three in a row is you know, fingers crossed. Let's keep it up. But 23 was essentially the coldest, latest harvest we've ever had. I'm talking to people that have been making wines here since the 80s and even the 70s, and people don't really remember picking grapes as late as they did in 2023, which is crazy, especially when we think of, how hot it's become lately. Um, so it was a cool, long growing season. Essentially, we had no summer out here. It was just
Right.
fog, or maybe that is what our true summer is just fog, and we never got our fall. But it was a really challenging growing season because of the mildew pressure. That is our biggest challenge growing out here. We don't get hot enough to actually burn off the mildew, and in 2023, that was just a constant struggle. But the wines have been fantastic, like you said. We get through the tough growing season, and then we get into the fall period, and it just became a you can pick whenever you want to pick. There's no weather coming up that's going to mandate that you have to pick. So the wines are uniformly really beautiful and balanced. I find that overall the flavors and the aromatics of the 2023 vintage tend to be a little bit more base for us in terms of being a little bit more on the savory side,
Mhm.
which is really cool compared to the 24 vintage, which, like we talked about, low yields, short bursts of heat, really high toned and aromatic vintage. And I think 2025 is going to fall somewhere in between. It's shaping up to be another really solid vintage. So, um, yeah, 2023, we love it. And then Oliver's Vineyard is a site in Edna Valley. It's owned and farmed by the Talley family. So this is actually the first Chardonnay vineyard that we began working with in 2018, or was that right? Yeah, in 2018. So that was the first Chardonnay we made, and it was from Oliver's. And so it's I've always admired the wines from Tally, especially this site. It just seems like it stands out as having a real purity to it. Sometimes Chardonnay in our area can get a bit tropical, and this site always seems to be like really pure. It's chamomile, it's more lemon peel. There's definitely a citrus kind of element to it, but it's more transparent. It's more of an essence of lemon, or rather than just like
Yeah, just a
brulee
squeeze of
lemon.
lemon. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Nice.
Um, so we make this wine with barrel fermentation, neutral oak. So all of our wines are raised in oak barrels. All of them
Mhm.
are neutral, so we don't get any impact from oak in any of our wines. That's our goal. And uh, this wine spends 10 to 11 months in barrel on lees, and then another 6 months in stainless steel, just to kind of go over the vintage, be able to age a little bit more before going to bottle, gain a little bit more complexity, a little bit more weight, and then we bottle it, unfined and unfiltered.
Okay. Are you doing any batonnage during that 11 to 12 months, kind of stirring up the lees?
No, no. So just trying to maintain the purity. So not trying to amplify anything. Trying to keep that essence that I always admired in those wines that made us seek out this vineyard. Um, by not trying to stir the lees or do anything else.
Yeah. And Susanna wants to know, how do you age this Chardonnay? And I don't know if she means like when it's under your control, or, what's the best way for her to hold on to this bottle for the next few years?
I think she
Well,
meant the aging in neutral barrel.
in neutral barrel and then
You
stainless
got to be more, you
steel.
got to be clearer, Susanna.
Yeah, yeah. So and I think that Chardonnay is just an ingredient, right? If we want to be really reductive,
Hmm.
there's a lot of different ways that you can make Chardonnay. In California, if the kind of stereotype is the buttery, oaky Chardonnay. That's not
Old
necessarily
stereotype.
what's that?
The old stereotype.
Right, but it still is. I was just on the East Coast. That's what people
Yeah.
expect. We're in California, so
It's
we
it's it's gonna take them
we're
another 5 to 7 years for trends to trickle out there.
yeah,
So
we're evolved, but it's going to take a little time to get back there.
they're still butchering the name Albarino back out there. So
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, they're not as good as Spanish.
Yeah.
Um, but that's still the stereotype, and there still are plenty of wines that are marketed in that style. Literally, wines called butter, and that's fine. I'm not here to yuck anyone's yum, but that's just not what we're into. So, what we like about Chardonnay, we love drinking it from France. We love drinking it from Chablis and from the Jura and from the Macon and these areas that don't typically put a lot of oak or kind of influence on the wines. It's more allowed to age and allow the sight and the expression of the variety to come through rather than a manipulation through lees or oak. So that's kind of really what we're looking for is just purity.
Nice. Yeah, it's very, very clean, very fresh. I always, equate Chardonnay to kind of like a blank white wall or a blank white canvas, and then it's really up to the winemaker to decide what directions they want to go into it. It feels like it's truly the winemaker's grape, and you guys have decided to be as hands off as you can, it sounds like.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're painting white on a white canvas, I guess.
But it's like an eggshell, or maybe like a,
Right.
just an
Oh,
offering,
no, no, of course.
like a
There's
cream.
yes.
Well, I mean, it's because Chardonnay is a neutral grape. It's not an aromatic grape. I mean, as a neutral grape, it means it can be manipulated more.
Yes. Moderately acid, neutral grape, that kind of thing. So, but no, this is a stunning example. And, I think it's, I feel like, you know, it's going to be very interesting to see as the SLO Coast evolves and you start to see more and more critics and people become familiar with it and kind of start to establish it and put benchmarks out there for wines that really establish the area in the same way that the San Rita Hills did, back in the 90s and early 2000s. It's going to be fascinating to see if there's an evolution of what people are doing in the SLO Coast with this particular grape.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Historically, there's been some really important small producers in the San Luis Obispo coast.
Mhm.
At the same time, a lot of kind of the area has been defined by bigger corporations and bigger interest wineries. And the predominant style has been to make one version of Chardonnay that's kind of that oaky, lees stirred kind of version, and
Yeah.
then have another version that's stainless steel. And
We
there's
we won't call
the
Chamisol out by name, but
oh no 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 I'm not no I'm
no, I'm
not trying to
kidding.
say
I'm
no
kidding.
and that no I'm not here to throw shade at anyone or anyone's decisions, but that was and there was multiple wineries. There's
Yeah.
literally four or five wineries that were all doing this, and it was almost ubiquitous in the area, and and I just think that there's a middle ground that I was missing.
Yeah.
Are
I think
you
what's
are
oh,
you with the new place that you're going to move to? Are you going to close your tasting room, or are you just going to have two?
No, we'll just have two.
Because I mean, he'll talk about this later, but if you go into the charming little town of San Luis Obispo, he's got a tasting room right in the heart there. Hard to find parking, but
I don't think of San Luis Obispo as a charming little town, but I guess it could be. I'm jaded, but
You're jaded. It's
yeah.
very charming and it's small. And there won't be parking issues at the new winery. That is for sure.
That's true. Excellent. Um, how about pairings with the Oliver Chardonnay?
Um, Chardonnay goes so good with so many different things. That could be really nice with, I mean, right now I want some cheese. as I'm just standing here. But if I was going to pair that with the whole meal, some like halibut and a butter sauce,
Yeah.
sautéed halibut and a butter sauce, fish again,
It's like you're reading my
chick,
mind, my friend.
yeah, yeah, chicken,
Potato Lyonnais, like something like that would be
ooh, yeah,
phenomenal. Yeah.
potato viennese would be good.
Hmm.
Yeah, light, going into cream kind of flavors,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. A little saltiness from like a Gruyere or a Asiago type of cheese there. Absolutely. Just something to set off that acidity and kind of wet the mouth on it, I think would be beautiful. Fantastic. Well, let's move on to the
Queso,
2024
queso in Maine.
queso. There
Queso
you
in
go.
Maine.
Queso and tamales for Thanksgiving.
I do
Arriba,
hope you pour
arriba.
in the wine and can take it with you in your Vineyard valise.
I hope they're turkey tamales. That'd be so much fun. No.
It would be really good with one of the sweet corn tamales.
Oh, there you go. Very
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Perfect. So 2024 Pinot Noir Slow Coast. One of the things I find interesting about Slow Coast is just kind of it's obviously a very, very small footprint, east to west. I think it's only about 20 miles, maybe 30 miles at its widest and 10 and shorter in some areas. But it's got a very long north-south. I mean, it basically goes from all the way down to the Santa Barbara line, all the way up to,
The Monterey line.
Monterey line. Exactly. Yeah. So you've got, you know, Cambria, you've got the Edna Valley, obviously, you've got Arroyo Grande, you're getting into like you know, Pismo Beach and kind of the dunes of Guadalupe and that area. Um, I don't know if you've been experimenting with vineyards from the different areas, and I know this Pinot you use a lot of grapes from different vineyards, but have you noticed differences in the slow coast? Are you starting to see, smaller microclimates, differentiations between the different areas?
Oh yeah, there's huge differences. So, I mean, the San Luis Obispo coast, as it's defined, is essentially we're bound by the Pacific on the west,
Hmm.
and so the AVA goes all the way to the ocean, and we're bound by the southern portion of the Santa Lucia Mountains on the east. So it is very narrow. So up in the northern part of the county, by Cambria and San Simeon, it's very narrow on the coast, and there's very few vineyards up there, but very, very unique and very distinct. And we actually have a little bit of Cambria fruit in this wine.
Hmm.
So this San Luis Obispo Coast Pinot Noir is a blend from 5 different vineyards, which come from Cambria, the predominantly Etna Valley, and then a little bit in the Avila Valley, which is extremely coastal vineyards, only a mile and a half from the ocean. And there are definitely regional differences between all of these areas, different microclimates that are really unique. But for the moment, I think what is the strength of the San Luis Obispo coast is since we are such a small appellation with, a relatively small amount of producers in it, is that we all kind of band together and we promote the San Luis Obispo coast together rather than try to separate into North Coast, Edna, Arroyo Grande. That almost becomes a little bit more confusing, and we don't have enough power to actually all come together and say we're the San Luis Obispo coast and we're defined by these microclimates. We're not
Hmm.
despite them, because it does get challenging with the coast hills where we are, and some of the vineyards that are tucked into the coast hills that are totally unique and show nothing in common almost with the other areas,
Hmm.
in terms of their daily growing season and heat and everything. But then the wines, when you take a step back, all have a similar characteristic that I think we have a little bit of richness to the fruit. So in Pinot Noir, we definitely have, nice dark red fruit, nice berry fruit. Uh, Consistently, no matter where we are, there's like a nice savory quality, verging on umami. So with these wines, the saltiness that I think is ubiquitous across them, that salinity, that iodine savory thing is almost like nori, and I just love that. Like so it's just everything is coastal. Everything is defined by the coast, and I don't mean that just as hyperbole, but when you taste the wines, I really feel like you do taste the essence of our coastal terroir.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, nori, bonito flake, like you get a lot of those kind of savory, salty notes on this particular wine. Obviously, Pinot Noir, a great, difficult to grow in its own right, no matter where you're growing it, but loves the coolness. You mentioned kind of mildew issues with the Chardonnay. Are you seeing that with Pinot as well?
Every variety.
Yeah.
Yeah, we farm Syrah and Grenache, which are hardier, and we have issues with those as well. So it's just one of those things. In farming organically, that means that we're just on top of our spray program, and that's really Rachel's kind of um, strength, especially when we get into the last wine in the flight, which comes mostly from our vineyard, which Rachel farms. But yeah, it's a constant challenge. Growing grapes anywhere is difficult. So this is just the constant challenge for us on the coast. And we think that the reward is certainly worth it.
Is the wind a challenge for you guys? I mean, I know in Santa Rita Hills, the wind can be very challenging because it can come in from two directions. But I imagine with the narrowness of the region, um, you don't have a lot of high elevation points, though, I imagine, in a lot of these vineyards, though. So do you have some shelter from the wind, or does wind come into play especially with something like Pinot Noir, where wind can be a huge uh, detriment to it?
No, yeah, wind is definitely an issue, and that's probably part of the reason why yields were so down for 2024, 40 to 50% down, and that was through drizzly, foggy, poor weather during flowering, and then wind. I mean, it, so it's not wind can be a savior for us when it blows out the fog and it helps dry out the canopy and reduce that mildew pressure that's been hanging on since all night into the early morning as we've had fog. But then if it's happening during flowering, it's also a challenge because it's going to obviously reduce our yields. So, but that's part of the region, the Central Coast, Santa Barbara, up to through the San Luis Obispo coast. We are notorious for having strong winds, just as the pressure moves down, as the winds move down the coastline through Big Sur, where they can't penetrate the mountains, they all just come roaring on shore here.
So what's been the response that you've seen from people towards slow coast Pinot Noirs? Obviously, you guys are kind of an up and coming region. The Edna Valley's been there for a while, but it does feel like it's a region compared to Santa Barbara, Santa Rita Hills, Paso Robles that more people are discovering rather than already kind of know. Are you starting to get some good feedback about the wines coming out of here? Do you feel like you're getting more of a regional, state, kind of national profile for the slow coast?
Oh yeah, I think that the San Luis Obispo coast is it, it's being rewritten in a
Mhm.
lot of ways. Obviously it's a young AVA, and the, the people that were the impetus for changing that San Luis Obispo coast, Brian Talley was a strong supporter of that, and he almost had a monopoly on Arroyo Grande Valley. So
Sure.
there's a lot of people that have pushed to get this San Luis Obispo coast AVA and um, to grow our awareness together. And at
Mhm.
the same time, there's new small producers that are gaining a lot of attention. I we're trying to make our wines. You have a lot of our friends like Scar of the Sea and Lady of the Sunshine and Outward and Raj Par doing their things, and Raj has a lot of influence
He
and he
does.
brings a lot of attention to the San Luis Obispo coast. And when we go out and we show the wines, people like them, and I think that they do really well, especially with food and at restaurants. And there's this really a really positive response because these wines have so much interest in them at a relatively really good value
Mhm.
to other more established regions in California. And I think that we deliver on the same quality that Santa Rita Hills and Santa Maria Valley and Sonoma Coast have, but we are a little bit unknown. So we're the underdogs, and we have these wines that have these really cool savory umami characteristics that do so well with food. And we can get them onto wine lists and into people's hands at an affordable price.
Nice. What do you think it's going to take to kind of make that breakthrough to real national renown? Is it going to be kind of one or two wineries stepping up and really establishing themselves and becoming kind of nationally distributed and really well known? Or is it just collectively, enough scores and buzz among critics and drinkers?
I'm just curious how you think it can be big brands. They're small brands that are SLO Coast appellated. The bigger brands in the area, like let's say Tally, still kind of run on their Edna Valley because Edna Valley and Arroyo Grande fall into the SLO Coast.
Yeah.
So the slow every producer he mentioned outward
I know they're all
tiny.
small.
Those are all tiny. We're all tiny, and Tally's tiny. Tally is very small as well.
Yeah.
True.
There's in the world of wine, these are all small. Gallo owns the rights to Edna Valley Vineyards, and it's a California appellated Chardonnay
Right, right.
Right.
that brands itself as being buttery. So there's not a drop of Edna Valley fruit in it. That's what I mean when I'm saying we're rewriting the script. We're not
Yeah.
rewriting it against the other small producers that are already here and have laid the
Right.
groundwork. We're rewriting it against corporate interests who have kind of been in the
I,
area for a long time.
I agree. I mean, I think of like a place like Paso Robles where, I spent years sort of out in the market trying to introduce other states, people outside of California to what Paso Robles is. And, you know, I will acknowledge that unfortunately it took the Justins and J. Lors and, some of the bigger DAOs, bigger brands out there to kind of raise the collective consciousness. You
Mhm.
guys are making such outstanding wines. I'm wondering if you have thoughts about like what's going to make that breakthrough, or will that breakthrough not come? Will you always kind of just be a smaller niche, like, and I don't use niche in a bad term,
No,
but just, a place where because you don't have bigger wineries that are, dominating that particular appellation, you're just going to kind of not exist, but you'll always you won't have the national profile that a lot of other regions do.
that's fine. I mean, we're a small region essentially, and
Yeah.
I think that if we can raise the bar for our region and be small producers and be known for making great quality and not being a mass-produced region, that would be us rewriting the script for what Edna Valley was kind of pigeonholed into. That is what I think that, we believe is possible in our region. We stand by the vineyards here and think that we should be established as small producers making great wines, not big producers making wines for what used to be Rite Aid. And then what's going to take it is, your forthcoming, sequel to Sideways, that's going to feature the San Luis Obispo
Oh no,
coast
I read the
and
book. It was not very good, and it was
oh,
Oregon, and it was terrible.
all right. Well,
But you're right. Okay, let's move on. Let's do food pairings with this one. Obviously like duck and Pinot Noir, classic pairing, mushrooms and Pinot Noir, classic pairings. What do you love to pair with your Pinot Noir?
so sticking with my out of the convention pairings, I am going to say sushi.
Any
I
particular
love,
cut?
yeah, I mean, I think when you're having tuna or salmon, so kind of darker fish
Yeah.
sushi, whether in rolls or nigiri or whatever. But I love Pinot Noir and sushi. It is so good.
Yeah. I will give you a one of my favorite pieces of sushi that I think would pair phenomenally with this is unagi,
Yeah.
the freshwater eel with that
Yeah.
charred little sauce on it. Just like
Hmm.
the savory notes on this, the sweetness of that. I think the richness, it's
Great
that's a
with
match made in heaven.
Yeah, that would be
the
awesome.
fresh tuna, even with some toro, some tuna belly.
Toro, Maguro, I mean, any of those would go great. Even like the egg would be fantastic with this. So I like it. I like
My
sushi
fave.
as yes. Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth and Shannon. Unagi. I appreciate it. The
And by the
unagi.
way, the savory sauce is called teriyaki sauce.
I know, it doesn't matter, but it's beautiful. And they char it. That's the best part. They use the, the creme brulee torch on it. So perfect. All right. Last but not least, the one wine that you gave a name to, the Dune Song Rhone blend, 62% Syrah, 38% Grenache. Um, and this gets us into a nice transition of so you and Rachel meet, you decide you're going to start making wine together. How did you come up with the name Dunites for your wine company?
So the Dunites are a really kind of cool local history that's a little bit forgotten. And the Dunites were a Depression era community of artists and poets and nudists and mystics that had their own little utopian thing going on in our coastal dunes here. And they kind of self-described themselves as a group of free thinkers. They weren't necessarily a commune. They kind of predated the hippies and beatniks um, and bohemians in terms
Mhm.
of like West Coast English speaking art and literature and being an actual hub for that scene, to the point where they were producing a magazine called the Dune Forum, that their ambition was for it to be the West Coast rival to the New Yorker,
Hmm.
published out of Oceano, California in the early 1930s, which Oceano today is one of the very last blue collar coastal communities in the state. So it was ambitious then and it would be ambitious now. But that kind of that forethought that they had and the people that they brought together to the point where people like Ansel Adams and Georgia O'Keeffe and Upton Sinclair and John Steinbeck were all making journeys down to the dunes to visit the Dunites,
Hmm.
was so cool, and it's such like a rich little piece of local history that almost no one knows about. And when people do know about it, they tend to go, "Oh, those bums living out in the dunes." And it wasn't really that. People were living out there for their own reasons, and a lot of them were actually very, you know, scholars or artists or writers in their own right. And you can go and find pieces of their artwork on the internet, and it's just so cool, that that was right here. So we took inspiration from them to start our brand.
Nice. How did you and Rachel come to find out about the Dunites and discover this history? Was this something you guys knew in advance? Was there somebody who kind of tipped you off to it?
We were interested in this whole area out here. So we would, and I wanted to call the original name I wanted to call the wine or the brand was the Dunes, um, because I think, yeah, I can go into it, but I don't have to. But essentially, at the mouth of every coastal valley that we grow wine on the Central Coast, Santa Rita, Santa Maria, Los Alamos, Arroyo Grande, Etna Valley, all of them. There's massive dune complexes at the mouth of each of them, and
Mhm.
essentially as the plates have been turned and forced upwards, and we have all these marine soils have been brought up to create present day California. And then all of that was washed out through various, mass floods over millions of years to create these valleys. And all that sediment that was washed out created these dunes. And I just thought that was a kind of, it tied it all together. But that's not an elegant way for me to describe a brand. And at the same time, we were going to this museum in Guadalupe, which is kind of a lost town down on the northern Santa Barbara coast.
I would
And
argue that Casmelia is even more lost
Casmalia
than
is
Guadalupe.
definitely more lost. They have a famous restaurant at least.
They do.
Though you can get very good Mexican food in Guadalupe.
Hmm.
And there's a museum called the Dune Center in Guadalupe, which is literally just about the dunes because this is, despite being unknown, uh, this dune complex just to the south of us is the largest existing dune complex on the whole west coast from the Aleutian Islands to Patagonia.
Really?
So it's like beyond remarkable how big of a geographical kind of feature this is in our region. Um, and it just gets almost no attention, except for people that are riding
I
their
was go
ATVs
I
getting
was going to
wild.
say when somebody dies from their ATV overturning and they think about shutting down the dunes, once a
Yeah,
year.
yeah. That's kind of the most attention it gets, but it's actually this really, really rich history, geologically and culturally in our area. It was important to the Chumash. You can still walk around and find mitten piles of old clams and stuff
Hmm.
like that, and it's just really cool. So we were drawn to that area, and during that kind of process, we became familiar with the Dunites.
Nice. Do you feel a kindred spirit to the Dunites in terms of, making wine as your art that you guys are kind of living out on the dunes and doing?
Not necessarily. I think that the inspiration that we took from them was to feel free to kind of pursue styles in winemaking that was not the convention of places that we were working or in the area that we're at. So to tack a different course, so to speak, and to try to make wines in a way that kind of represented the area, how we saw it, and in wines that would make us excited and in a style that we wanted to drink. So that was more the inspiration. It was just the ability to not be bound by kind of trying to do it in this certain protocol of wines have to be made in a certain way.
Yeah. Uh, Sandy, to be fair, I don't think of you as Bohemian at all, unless you're actually from southern Germany near the Czech border. Then you might be actually Bohemian, but she's going to respond to that. So this particular wine, the Dune Song, you mentioned earlier when kind of your initial vision for the winery was to do uh, cool climate Syrah. And this one is your Syrah Grenache blend. So, and you gave it the name Dune Song. Is there a tie in there, or what does the name come from? And why did you decide to blend these two grapes together?
Ooh, well, the name is just a name that we liked.
Okay.
There's no strong reference there.
There's no like, when you hear the wind blowing off the dunes, it makes this sound that is the Dune
No,
Song
no,
kind of thing.
no. I mean, essentially, it is evocative of kind of a place and the austerity of being out in the dunes. It is quiet out there, and it is still, except for the wind and the sand, and that is kind of its own magical experience. So yes, it's evocative of that area, but it's just yeah, it's a name that we made up. Um, and then Syrah, we love the Syrah in our area. It can be so dark fruited and savory and peppery and it's really cool, kind of like admittedly kind of geeky
Mhm.
wines. You know, not everyone I've learned is like seeking out cool climate Syrah every night to drink.
Which is
But
a shame
which is
because
a shame because I think it's amazing.
yeah, I'm with you.
But it's not it doesn't have the cachet that Pinot Noir and Cabernet Sauvignon have. It's challenging to to drink those wines sometimes because they're not always like as approachable as what we might always want. So what we really like about this wine is we get all that kind of interest, that dark fruit and that pepper,
Hmm.
because from the Syrah. But then by blending in the Grenache, we get this burst of red fruit, and it's almost like pomegranate aromatically. And then the palate becomes softer and more fleshed out, and it just becomes such an approachable, easy, like joyful wine, which is really what we want. We want the wines to be joyful. We're not. I think that we do kind of take some approaches to wines that in winemaking that are very serious and well thought out. But in the end, we want the wines to be just fun to drink because that is what wine is to us. Going back to that first memorable or important bottle, it's that this wine is fun to drink throughout the course of a night. And that's the goal. And that's really the goal with Dune Song.
Yeah, and I mean, Syrah is one of those grapes, especially cool climate Syrahs from the northern Rhone, that they can be very challenging wines to enjoy on their own without food. I mean, you get a lot of dark flavors, tar, bacon, smoke, just brambles, all sorts of, you know, grippy, bitey, pointy things to them. So having that Grenache in there, I think definitely sells it out. I'm interested, Suzanne, you said it's odd because it's highly drinkable and easy to pair. What is odd about that? Um, and
Probably that I was saying that Syrah is challenging.
that's true. That's true. Um, but how do you decide on the blend of this every year? Do you sort of go in with a mindset? Will there be some years where this is going to be Grenache heavy, or will it always be Syrah heavy? What's your deciding factors for this one?
No, it can change for sure. This wine, and that's why the varietals are on the back, not on the front.
Yeah.
So this wine, we want to have the flexibility to adjust and just try to make the best wines that we can every year and not be bound to going back to the inspiration from the Dunites. We don't want to be bound by we don't want to pigeonhole ourselves into
Mhm.
saying this blend is always about two-thirds, one-third, and we need to stick to that. We just want to make the best wine that we can each year. Um, and this wine comes mostly about 70% from a vineyard that we lease and in Rachel Farms. So that site is called High Kite, as in whitetail kites that nest in the trees there. And we walked out there with our toddler and got in the mood of got used to saying hi to the kites, and that's how we got the name. Um, and so this wine is mostly from that site, as well as Rancho Arroyo Grande, out past Lake Lopez, if you're familiar with our area. So really cool up in the hills. Really, really wild spot where when you go and you check vineyards and you start walking halfway down the vineyard row, you go, oh no, I am very alone out here. There's no cell service, and you because people have seen the bears and the mountain lions and the
Yep.
rattlesnakes, and it's like I do not feel safe walking this row anymore. I'm going back to the car. I have enough sample. But that's just the kind of what this wine is, and this wine is meant to be our approachable Rhone variety blend, and then we have single vineyard wines on top of that.
Nice. Stacy wanted to know, comparing this slow Syrah, obviously it's a blend, but the Syrah that you're using this with a Paso Syrah, what would you say are the differences?
Oh, well, I mean, Paso is a warmer climate,
Hmm.
so the wines can still have some of the same kind of characteristics of being dark fruited, and still have like that meaty kind of Syrah quality. But I would say on the San Luis Obispo coast, we tend to have a lot of freshness and energy in the wines. We have more acidity, lower alcohol, more of that peppery characteristic. The savory components are less meaty and more like chaparral and tar. Whereas when you go up to into Paso, the wines can be a little bit more jammy,
Yeah.
and the fruit can go a little bit more into from blackberry to blackberry jam, or smoky kind of meaty aromatics
It's
for the
more
savory
like a
components.
bacon jam versus just a straight bacon smoke kind of thing, or bacon fat.
Right.
Um, Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, the Paso Syrahs that I've had, especially recently, do tend to lean into the riper side of things, whereas Slow Coast, it leans closer to the Northern Rhone, where you get more of the acidity, but you get a lot more of those darker fruits, verging onto some of the like bitterness notes, and not in a pejorative way, but definitely things like tar and nettles and you know some of those more challenging flavors that you should be getting on a Syrah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you also have, I mean, aside from when you pick, because maybe they pick a little later in Paso for that ripeness, you have very different climates because it is that much warmer. Even though there's a diurnal shift, which is where you get freshness in Syrah and Paso, you don't have the coastal influence that you get in the slow coast, that coolness. So a longer growing season because it's slow and steady. So I mean,
Absolutely.
wouldn't you call slow coast more like cool climate Syrah compared to Paso is not cool climate Syrah?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. These are cool climate Syrah. I mean, the three-quarters of the vineyards are Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And then Syrah and Grenache have a lesser but no less important history in our area. Obviously, John Albans kind of championed them. Bob Lindquist planted the Sawyer Lindquist vineyard. So there's been a really kind of important history of Syrah and Grenache here, and they have such a unique characteristic. I think that they have the most of all the varieties in our region. They have the most unique signature to our area because they just retain so much nuance.
Mhm.
Since they really are at the edge of the ripeness, we couldn't get these wines much more ripe if we wanted to here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool climate Syrahs will not drink as hot.
Yeah. No, I
No,
totally agree. Like to me, that
Overripe, big ripeness, that will
yeah,
bring
the
hot.
Rhones that are coming out of, or the Rhones, the Grenaches and Syrahs that are coming out of Slow Coast are much closer in spirit to that you're finding in the northern and even kind of the northern part of the southern Rhone Valley, than a lot of the stuff coming out of Paso Robles. And I live in Paso Robles and I love Paso Robles, but I've stopped drinking Syrahs from here because I do find that most of them are just getting too jammy. The heat here, the late ripening of the grapes, particularly Syrah, it's just it leads to a little too much sweetness, and kind of roundness of the wines that with a good Syrah you don't necessarily want.
yeah, I mean the style that we like to have is definitely more of that fresh, energetic side of Syrah, and we find that it's really well suited to our area.
Nice. Do you have, since you spent some time in France making wine, do you have any particular regions in France that you're sort of targeting for this wine, or you want to be, compared favorably to?
No, no, I mean we're targeting San Luis Obispo Coast really.
Yeah.
We're not trying to dial up or change kind of any of the flavors that we're already getting from the vineyards that we work with. I think that we choose sites that tend to have similarities in
Mhm.
terms of kind of what I think made some of those other vineyards I was fortunate to walk in great. But that's more about, but the characteristics are unique to here. So, I mean, it might be a loose soil or a light rocky soil, but in the Northern Rhone, that was granite or schist.
Right.
Here, it's sand and shale. Um, but it's no less important. It's not one is better than the other to me. This is those grapevines thrive because they're vigorous. They need this kind of loose soil. And here we have that in our very own distinct way. And that's what's really inspiring to me.
Yeah. And you're making this wine in the same way that you are your others, neutral oak, minimal intervention.
Yep. Yeah. So native yeast across the board for all the wines. The reds see a little bit of whole cluster. So this sees about 20% whole cluster, same as the Pinot. And that means we're just keeping the grapes actually intact. So on the stems, and they go into the bottom of the fermenter, and then we destem on top of that. And then really gentle fermentation. So the maceration is very gentle. We're not trying to extract much. We're trying to have more of an infusion than an extraction. Then we basket press, which is again just gentle. That's the theme of it all. Just gentle. There's nothing fancy. It's just gentle.
Gentle
Um,
and soft,
yeah,
slow and easy.
that's
Nice.
right. Yeah,
Very nice.
yeah, gentle pressing, and then the wine goes to barrel, and it'll sit in barrel until it's time to bottle, 10 months later.
Very nice. Pairings with this particular wine, it's got a little more heft, a little more depth than the wines we've had tonight. But
Hmm.
what do you like to pair? That pepperiness is definitely noticeable on this one.
Yeah, it's easy to go into like barbecue now.
Mhm.
It's very easy to say lamb and any kind of barbecue. A braise is, wintertime now. A little braise beef or short ribs and some red wine
Mhm.
would be very good. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's also kind of a simple wine, like pizza, takeout.
True. Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
could see this with, especially if you're
Beef
doing like a
bolognese.
pepperoni sausage. Yeah, something with that meaty, spicy component to it to match that pepperiness. And I think it would be delicious.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, before we wrap up here, Tyler, tell us a little bit about, as Allison mentioned earlier, you've got the downtown tasting room in San Luis Obispo, and you have this new facility that's opening up. When do you anticipate opening up that new facility? And then, tell us about the downtown space.
Yeah, so the new facility, which is going to be called Edna, um, and then it's going to all the different brands and restaurants and everything, they're going to be at Edna. So it'll be Dunites at Edna. That will be opening up hopefully in mid-March.
Hmm,
That's kind of
nice.
our timeline right now. So we're a few months away, but that's hopefully coming pretty quick. And then our tasting room in downtown SLO, it's on Garden Street, which is a cool little street. Nice wide sidewalks, really cool old building. It's a whatever 140-year-old building that we're in. Small, quaint, really really cute. And yeah, so we're open there Tuesday through Sunday, a little bit later in the evening until 7 p.m. Kind of in that downtown vibe. So it's a great spot to pop by for a wine tasting or just a glass of wine. We have some local cheeses and some snacks there, and yeah, it's just kind of a casual place to drop in and drink some wine.
Very cool. Are you seeing a nice mix of mainly locals? Are you getting mainly out of towners, or kind of an equal mix of both?
No, it's a mix of both. Yeah, we're right next to the Hotel Syrah, so we get people
Hmm,
coming in from there, and
very nice.
yeah, and we get people just walking off the street a little bit, and then locals as well.
Nice.
Uh, we have been at that tasting room since 20, oh geez, I have to do math. 2021.
Okay.
Yeah, November 2021 we opened. So four
Oh,
years.
I guess I came in right after you opened it because it was right. I guess I was in a post-COVID-ish world.
Oh yeah, we were still wearing masks and everything. Yeah,
I know. I first met Tyler. I had him on my podcast, and I went in and interviewed him in his tasting room. Did we wear masks when we did that? I can't remember.
we may have taken them off.
I can't remember. We must have been in a place where, because I did some with shields and everything on.
No, it was better. I mean, when we opened up, we were allowed to, we were definitely allowed to be open, like, and I think it was not mandatory for masks even and stuff like that, but we were definitely wearing masks a lot in the beginning months. Yeah,
Nice.
whatever. We don't need to revisit COVID.
No, we don't. But to answer your question, Elizabeth, mid-March is when they're talking about opening up the Dunites at Edna and the other wineries. So the restaurant, the wineries will hopefully all be open. It's, if you've been down, it's right across from where Sausalito Canyon is. kind of right on that stretch, kind of right at the midway point of the Edna Valley, really.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and you can follow us on Instagram or them or on
yeah,
Instagram or sign up for our emails, and we will make sure that everyone knows once it's coming up.
perfect. I have to ask, so we talk about, the five varietals that you guys are working with, obviously Albarino, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Grenache, Syrah. Is there anything that you guys are looking to add to the mix, or is it pretty much just these five
Oh,
for the long haul at this point?
oh, Chris, you know the wine industry.
I
Everything's
do.
true except for what I'm about to tell you next, is the most true. We do work with the sixth variety. We work with Zinfandel, and I didn't include it because that wine comes from Sonoma Valley, so
Hmm.
it's very different. We work we 2023 was our first vintage, or no, sorry, 2024 was our first vintage with that, and it comes from the Bedrock Vineyard, which was planted in 1888 and is a field blend of 27 varieties. And when the possibility or the option to be able to work with that fruit and that team up there came up, we jumped on it
Is that the
because
Peterson family that maintains Bedrock?
yeah.
Nice.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. So it's really cool. And that's yeah. R- So that's a fun one that we do. And then let's see, in 2025, Rachel has actually got a little wine going that's going to be slightly different. It's still going to be a Dunites wine, but it's probably going to be a different front label, with her own kind of handle on it. And
Okay.
that's going to be a Sauvignon Blanc Albarino co-ferment.
Oh, interesting. Very nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Is there anything out there? You mentioned Raj Par, and he's definitely bringing a lot of unusual things to the Central Coast, Mongoose, and a bunch of those kind of
Mm.
Jura and Savoie, very cool weather grapes. Is there anything out there you're kind of interested in or champing at the bit to, get your hands on or maybe experiment with?
Well, we had one of our important vineyard sources is Spanish Springs Vineyard, two
Yes.
and a half miles from the ocean. So it's actually the coldest site that we work with. We didn't taste any wines from there today, so we didn't have the chance to talk about it much. But we had some Chenin Blanc grafted over out there this year.
Interesting.
So Chenin Blanc, and then yeah, just trying to keep exploring or diving in and you know, with the varieties that we have, Albarino, Syrah kind of stuff, Chardonnay, we're just seeking out more of these and how what we can do where we have the abilities to be in the vineyards to kind of either do some co-planting or look at managing in a more kind of manner that's a little bit more regenerative. Yeah, that's really what we're interested in because in the cellar, there's not that much I can do to make a wine better. I can surely make a wine a lot worse, but there's not a lot we can do to make it better. So we try to do it in the vineyard.
Nice. Susanna wanted to know with tonight's pairings, how did you select the order? Why did you start with the Albarino?
That's a good question because we could start with the Chardonnay. It's a toss up on those, and the Chardonnay is a little bit lighter. But the Albarino, just that kind of I don't know. I like that kind of kick to get started. It's so aromatic and opulent, and it's just kind of fun to get rolling with that. And then the Chardonnay just kind of it's a nice segue into the Pinot Noir. It, you know and then the Syrah and Grenache blend last.
Yeah,
It makes a lot of sense.
I think it makes sense. I mean, typically when you're doing a tasting, you start with your higher acidity wines first and then go to your lower acidity, both in the whites and the reds. So that's kind of a standard way to do it. Are there any, I know we mentioned varietals, but are there any vineyard sites or, areas within the SLO Coast that you're looking to expand to or possibly get some grapes from, just to expand your palate or, explore some different flavors?
Well, we're doing a lot more with Spanish Springs now, which is great because that's the first vineyard that we worked with. That's where we launched their brand with Syrah. And it sold about a year ago, and the new owners brought on a new vineyard manager who was the old vineyard manager. He worked there before. Um, and he's really into like the organic farming and regenerative farming. So we've had a lot of really fun discussions about things we can do out there. And this year we, like I said, we grafting over some Chenin Blanc. We're going to do a little replanting out there in the first block that we got Syrah from, and then we're getting Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, which we never did there before, as well. So more just diving deeper into that vineyard right now,
Yeah,
and trying to maintain, strong relationships with the vineyards that we have, and keep on having long-term access to the vineyards that we work with.
yeah. And what's your total case production?
About 3,000 cases.
Okay, very nice. Awesome. So if folks want to get a hold of you or try some of these other wines, the Zinfandel, the single varietal Syrah and Grenache that you mentioned, maybe you mentioned you do some additional single vineyard Pinots and Chardonnays. What's the best way for them to get in touch or visit your website, or discover the myriad of wines that you have under the Dunites label?
Yeah, obviously, our tasting room is always a great spot if you're in town or passing through. And then our website is duniteswineco.com. You can just Google search Dunites. It's also one of the benefits of having an esoteric name is there's not much else that pops up when you Google search us.
Becoming very popular with trademark issues arising. People going with these kind of difficult to pronounce or spell names that are easy to Google.
Yeah, yeah. You Google Dunites and you can find us. It's not that hard. And then our Instagram is at Dunites. And those are, yeah, I think those are kind of the best places. And then we send out some emails and stuff like that if you're interested, and you can sign up for that on our website.
Nice. What's the weirdest butchering of your winery's name that you've heard?
Oh, I don't know about where we get Dunites a lot, which
I
is
like
fine.
Dunites. That feels like if you're eating tamales in Maine during Thanksgiving, they should be called
Ah,
Dunites.
yes. Yes. Tamales.
Tamalese. Tamalese. Awesome. Um, can you stick around for a couple of minutes if people want to ask you questions?
Sure.
I know you've got the little one, and we don't want to take you away from him or her.
No, let's go.
Perfect. So yeah, at this point, if anybody wants to unmute themselves, I will mention before that we've got our December email will be coming out, if not on Friday, on Monday, but we've got another fun Central Coast winery, Doctor's Orders, which is actually based just outside of Ojai, doing some really interesting wines. Is going to be the final wine for 2025 for us. So keep an eye out for that offer. The virtual tasting will be on December 11th, so coming up quickly. But
And if you recall with Stephen Kent Winery, we did Cab Franc 4 ways. We'll be doing an exploration of Grenache
that's right.
4 ways.
Grenache 4 ways with
Or
Doctor's Orders. A really, really fun, fascinating, new, interesting, completely different winery, but should be a lot of fun. So keep an eye out for that email coming in the next few days, and we'll be following up after Thanksgiving with that. And hopefully we will see you guys on the 11th for our next virtual tasting. Okay. At this point, if you want to unmute yourself and say anything to Tyler, be nice. Go ahead.
I really enjoyed these wines. They were really delicious. Like someone had put in the comments, the way that certain nose profile, you're expecting something else, but it's still, all of them were incredibly balanced. Like the Syrah, the blend was amazing. The Pinot, at first I was like, wow, this is like, bright and red fruits but still had, like acidity but nice roundness. The Chardonnay was really intriguing because, like you said, everybody still thinks of Chardonnay as, oh, it's oaky or it's buttery, it's this. And I think not stirring the lees really impacted and going neutral barrel. Like just was really a fascinating softness, roundness that I really enjoyed. All of the wines were fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's fun. I mean, it all goes back to the unexpected, going back to that important bottle. It's all about the unexpected qualities of wine that I frankly think that we just don't get in any other kind of beverage. And that's what's fun. I mean, to pop a cork and be able to trick your mind, and maybe not trick your mind, but to have to think about something while you're enjoying it, and that's joyful. It's fun.
Yeah. I think one of the best compliments I can pay you with tasting through all these wines is to say that each and every one tastes like there was no winemaker involved in these whatsoever. It sounds like a backhanded compliment, but the fact that they're, so elegant and stand on their own, and you don't taste any of that manipulation or oaking or, just everything really tastes so natural and fresh and alive. I think it's a great compliment to you.
Thank you.
And as a fellow gaucho, older than
Yes.
you, but as a fellow gaucho, I
Right.
appreciate that. So,
And another
yes.
Legato.
And my girlfriend is a gaucho as well. So we've got gauchos abound.
Excellent. I feel at home.
I'm not a big wine drinker, big white wine drinker. Let me be very clear about that. But I absolutely love the two white wines. I love the what is it?
Albarino.
Albarino. Never heard of it before, and I'm really surprised, and I'm going to shame myself for hours and days.
That's okay.
But oh my goodness, it just was absolutely, as you mentioned, the nose and the taste were totally different in a very, very good way. So I definitely will be getting some of those bottles and having them for our white wine friends who come over, because I have 250 bottles here, but they're all red. So
You start with some white, then move into the red.
no wine tasting, and it's like, let's just bypass that. Let's go straight into the reds and show me your library wines. Not interested in anything else, but I was really impressed, and having it for the summer. The texture across the board was absolutely beautiful. I at all four wines, and I like what was said earlier by Chris, is that it really feels that there was no intervention by anybody. The grapes really came through in a very beautiful and natural way. We finally pulled out some cheeses, and we're having cheeses, and oh my goodness, it just popped. And just really excited. Thank you so much for what you're doing, and I'm sure we'll be seeing each other sometime in SLO.
Oh, thank you. That's really
Yeah,
kind. I
thank
appreciate
you.
that. Thank you.
I think that's a really good point. I have the privilege of covering Dunites for the Slow Wine Guide. So I have always been kind of blown away by the texture of the wines. I think that's what stands out. And I mean, that's what I love about the wines I want to drink are textured wines. And I love the mouthfeel of these. They have great acidity and freshness, but it's also that they're complete. You get the freshness, but it doesn't disappear quickly, but it doesn't wait. It's not weighty.
Yes.
So
I really enjoyed it. I was very curious when I read and about SLO. I'm like, oh, okay, haven't heard a lot about SLO.
Mhm.
So let's do this. I want to learn more about this. And boy, I feel like I've come out, and I've been missing out all these years.
You
And I
have, and
hate missing out, The
and it's
whole
an
FOMO thing came out.
it's an easy weekend trip from Claremont. You can, 3.5, 4 hours up, and you've got the Hotel Syrah. You've got some great hotels in the downtown area. Edna Valley is pretty much right there. I mean, you're just about 15 minutes away driving from downtown SLO to
Awesome.
get to the heart of the Edna Valley. So it's a really accessible wine region.
Or stay on the coast, stay
Yep.
out in the valley or down on the coast, Pismo Beach, and
That's true. Yeah, you've got
Yeah.
Avila Beach, Pismo Beach, all those areas there are just
Yeah, I was just telling Shannon we need to do a stop. We need to. We're taking a trip. So that's why I asked when is the restaurant opening? Because if I'm going to do this, let's just do it right.
Yeah.
We'll be up there.
No,
So I just followed you on Instagram, so we'll be there.
Awesome. I appreciate that. We look forward to seeing you. Reach out when you're on your way up.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's never too late to know a new region. You're going to introduce it to other people who don't know it. But I'm just very proud of you for opening up your mind to white wine. Because
yes. Next year
Now
we're
that you
going
know,
to
you
work
have
on
no idea.
rosé and sparkling.
yeah, there is a world out there. You're going to be so excited now that you realize that wine's not the Antichrist.
It's not. They're kidding.
No. Rosé,
Well, sort
and
of, maybe
sparkling
a little
are
bit.
amazing.
It's less an antichrist and more like an alternate pope. Think of it as like the Chateauneuf de Pape in
There you go.
Yeah,
In back in the day.
the Great Schism.
Schism.
Exactly, yes. The Great
Yes.
Schism.
Yes. I very well aware. No, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much, and I look forward to meeting you in person.
Thank you. Likewise.
Right. All right. Any other thoughts, comments there? Sorry, I'm getting the hook from my significant other over there. So speak now or forever hold your peace, ladies and gentlemen.
It looks like Susanna's pointing.
I'm ready whenever you are. Sandy, thank you. All right, everybody. Well, we appreciate it. Everybody have a fantastic Thanksgiving next week. And we will hopefully see all of you before Christmas on the 11th for doctor's orders. And have a great night. Take care, everybody. Good night.
Thank you all. I appreciate
thank you, Tyler.
Thank
We
you,
appreciate
Tyler.
it. DunitesWineCo.com, just so you don't forget. All right. Good night,
See you,
everybody.
Ned.
Bye-bye.